Have you ever considered that one of the most human forms of storytelling today might not come from a novel or a film, but from an anime episode released every week? Or a manga chapter you wait days for only to devour in minutes? Doesn't it seep into our lives, providing fresh lenses for context and meaning to gather? You don't watch and feel separate from it. I mean, wouldn't that explain why its global popularity continues to be one of the fastest growing among any form of narrative and storytelling? Doesn't anime have a way of connecting us in a world full of disconnections? And could there be a reason for why that is? Anime is more than just a medium of entertainment. And it's now more than just some niche hobby. Its gravitational pull is strong and far-reaching. It captivates. It has people wired into something collective that centers around storytelling, which is as human as anything. Weekly, we anticipate the next chapter, the next episode to drop. We wait for teasers, avoid spoilers, and can't wait to partake in the conversation. Though this modernizing world can be often associated with the act of disconnecting people, anime continues to form a collective refuge. But this isn't anything new. Throughout history, narrative has connected people and given them that momentary shelter from reality. Engaging stories help us mitigate the human condition. This is a part of why weekly episodes of our favorite anime or new chapters of a manga are so vital to our lives. They're dependable installments that connect us to one another in an innately estranged world. Anime might just be the best example of that. After all, manga, anime's precursor, is rooted in a history of consistent installments of connection and temporary escapes when its country needed it the most. Those roots run deep within anime, as it continues to uphold and advance the art of collective and collaboration storytelling through its serialization. And those roots connect to Victorian England, the period of Charles Dickens, when serial fiction became not only popular and successful, but also deeply ingrained in a collective consciousness when it was most needed. Exploring these two histories, from Dickens to Osamu Tezuka, may explain why anime is the best medium at representing the most human form of storytelling. But before we dive into this any further, if you enjoy videos that analyze the wider connections of anime through diverse lenses, then be sure to hit that like button, tap the bell, and subscribe to the channel. That way, you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. From me, of course. Alrighty, let's jump back in. Before Japan began producing influential and captivating serialized fiction, the method began in the 17th century England, but most of those were reprintings of the Bible. But it was around the mid-1800s that Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers was being released in monthly installments of a periodical, making it the first serialized novel. That may sound like a whole lot of nothing, but think about the anime episodes, or the influence of TV shows releasing episodes over the greater part of the previous century. It was the first iteration of circulating narrative in installments. And it was massively popular. With Dickens and others, serial fiction nearly became synonymous with Victorian England. In France, it became known as the Roman feuilleton, which was championed by famous writers Dumas and Balzac. There were economic benefits to this. For one, in a post-Enlightenment society, literary rates were higher, raising demand for reading materials. Also, for the populace, it was cheaper to buy the occasional issue than to purchase a bound novel. On the other end, the technology of printing periodicals allowed production costs to be passed on to the reader slowly, over time. Writers could ultimately get paid more, especially if they knew how to use cliffhangers to build anticipation. On top of it, with the most controversial aspects, there was far more money being generated because of the accompanying advertising space. Practical as it is, I argue the human element remains the most significant. The thing about the serial novel was not just that it appealed to a hunger for suspense and drama, but that it widened the door for reading's most social aspects. Dickens' lesser-known contemporary William Thackeray, in a review of A Christmas Carol, credited serial publishing with cultivating a communion between the writer and the public. Something continual, confidential, something like personal affection. That may be explained by the fact that Victorian England was a time when the humanistic escape was urgently needed. Life, for many, was lived amid literally toxic modernization, with urban factories, smokestacks, while working long, laborious hours. When work schedules demanded so much, leisure time had to be put to good use, and likely for sanity's sake, especially with Dickens and others writing stories illuminating the cruel struggles and unjust squalor of working-class peoples, including A Christmas Carol. These serial novels were a support system, an escape from rapid and arguably alienating modernization. And that's a relatable notion regarding manga and anime, right? Japan has had a long tradition of visual storytelling in its culture, but modern manga, the precursor to anime, really began developing more recently. Its early roots emerged in the late 1800s, when magazine and comics began arriving in Japan from the West. With Dickens having passed in 1870, among other changes in the literary world, these comics were pretty much the extent of continuing that serialized fiction. Any novel being serialized at this point was to facilitate bound book sales. With the arrival of Western comics, satirical Japanese comics would begin to circulate. In 1900, the Jiji Shimpun newspaper began printing Jiji manga, a recurring comic supplemented by Kitazawa Rakuten. That precipitated manga, but they were still mere early signs. The true beginning of manga as we know it is attributed to Osamu Tezuka, who is regarded as the god of manga. In 1951, Tezuka released Mighty Atom, known in the US as Astro Boy. This is where an entrance into a collective psyche begins to take shape for manga. Post-war Japan was not only a place that required escapes from reality, it was also a place in search of a collective identity. This was a nation that was occupied by another power, as well as stuck with a devastated economy and the trauma of 2 nuclear blasts. It's no wonder Astro Boy was such a resonating hit. It's about an orphan robotic boy abandoned by his creator, who is forced to find himself and be a force for peace. Even slightly before that, Japan found a relatable escape in Sasai-san, or Miss Sasai, which was first published in a local paper in spring 1946. It followed Miss Sasai and her family, providing a narrative about identity, changing family dynamics in Japan after 1945. The rise of serialized fiction in Japan connected writers to audiences and formed the same bonds that old Thackeray alluded to. As key predecessors, both Astro Boy and Sasai-san appealed to the collective unconscious of post-war Japan, and thus, manga and anime could blossom, just as Japan came into its own in the 20th century. The art style fittingly moved from more childish or Disney-like aesthetics to those more familiar today, as it developed further within the collective. And those deep meanings rub off on others. They appeal because they're authentic. They originate from stories that connect one another. The human condition has long required storytelling to mitigate the crueler realities, and stories that somehow foster human connection have a lasting impact in the collective unconscious. From oral histories of Homer to serial novels of the Victorian age, to manga, to anime series, these narratives cultivate common ground and interconnection. Writers like Dickens once did that. A Christmas Carol, though not necessarily in serial form, is still a part of many people's holiday traditions. It's deeply meaningful to Western notions of Christmas, mainly in the Anglosphere. Dickens still remains a literary giant, but Dickens is not going to advance methods of storytelling and human connection in the modern world. Still, to this day, anime continues to forge and strengthen collective bonds through storytelling. Stemming from its precursor manga, anime continues to grow, evolve, and shine brighter as a modern champion of human storytelling across the globe. Try to think of another medium that delivers ongoing, emotionally resonant storytelling without feeling like a corporate cash grab, without leaning on reboots, sequels, or endless cinematic universes. It's not the only option, but anime stands out. It still prioritizes connection between characters, creators, audiences, and between fans, who gather weekly to share, react, and feel. As the world continues to modernize, will those bonds grow stronger, or will the medium evolve into something else entirely? Either way, one thing is clear. Anime isn't just entertainment, it's one of the last places storytelling still brings us together. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And now I want to hear from you. So tell me, what's one anime that brought you closer to someone else? Let me know that series in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and want to be a part of future anime discussions through a cinematic lens, then be sure to hit that like button, tap the bell, and subscribe to the channel. I will see you all next time. Bye!